You've waited all week, and it's finally here. The Eat, Drink, Explore Weekly Travel Deals Extravaganza.
Yes, indeed. 9:19 the time. Welcome back to the program, everyone, on this Sunday Fun Day morning. I am your host, Randall White, and we are coming to you, as always, from California's fantastic Central Coast. Well, I figured we are about a month away now from Thanksgiving, and a lot of you listening will have to fly to get to your family, your friends, your network of people that you will hang out with for the Thanksgiving holiday. And that's not always easy because everyone else is doing the same thing if they're not hopping in the car or, in my case, staying right at home. I think that's what we're doing this year. Jury's still out. We'll find out. I think the family is coming to us. But for everyone else that needs to hop on a plane, we have the expert, the person who many networks tune to find out how do you avoid all of the Thanksgiving hassles. Rick Seaney, he's the co-founder and CEO of FareCompare.com, is here to give us the details. Welcome to the program, Rick.
Hey, great. Thank you for having me on today.
Yeah, nice to have you back on. We haven't had you on in a while, but we figured this is a big deal coming up, Thanksgiving. And what's the number one mistake people make heading into the Thanksgiving holiday when they're booking their airfare?
I think the number one mistake they make is trying to travel on Wednesday and Sunday. Mm-hmm. These are the two busiest days of the travel season. So not only is it a pain to travel that particular day, it's also the most expensive. So if you can avoid those 2 days, I know it's sort of the popular time because you're trying to maximize your trip and not miss any work or get the kids back to school. But that is basically, there's a premium of anywhere from 20 to 30% on those days.
Wow. So just taking one extra vacation day, if you can afford it, will really save you in the in the booking fees.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The price of an airline ticket, it's already raised because this is a very popular time to fly holidays. So you already have a raised base point already. And then if you want to fly at the most convenient times, airlines even garner a more hefty premium on that as well.
So sometimes people think they have to, on both ends, not fly on a busy day. But if you can just manage one of those days, right, to move it from the most popular?
Yeah, sure. Well, you'll get half the benefit if you don't leave on a Wednesday or come back on a Sunday. The actual cheapest days to fly are the Monday and Tuesday before. The actual very cheapest day is the day of Thanksgiving, actually the morning of Thanksgiving. And returning Saturday is much cheaper than Sunday, and Tuesday is much cheaper than Monday.
I've seen sometimes the airlines will throw out these last-minute incredible deals for Thanksgiving Day. So if you're one of those people that have to work on the Wednesday before and Black Friday, but you'd still like to see your family, you can get a round trip on Thanksgiving for a good price, right?
Yes, on Thanksgiving Day. We've seen these before. They're called, we call them here internally turkey fairs. And they tend to roll them out about 3 weeks beforehand, sort of late October timeframe where we're sitting today. And but we haven't seen them as much the last 2 or 3 years. One of the big problems right now is that over the last 5 years, which includes the recession and the oil crisis of 2008, airlines have been retracting, especially the legacy airlines have been retracting back into their hubs, and they've been reducing capacity. So there's just not a huge reason to discount at these huge peak times. There's just no reason for them to discount. And that also means a lot of people who had nonstop flights in years gone by going to grandma's house for Thanksgiving or having them come in are also going to have the inconvenience of at least one-stop flights.
I've been really fortunate over the past several weeks. I flew to round trip to Colorado out of Santa Barbara to Denver for 236, I think it was. And then also San Francisco round trip to Austin on Virgin America for, again, it was like around 250. What are the sticker prices people are going to see, however, when it comes Thanksgiving time? They're not going to be in that bargain basement range.
Yeah, well, there's some good news and bad news. Let me give you sort of some context. The good news is that our tracking data shows prices are only up 1% year over year. Oh. Airlines have tried to hike fares almost a dozen times this year with almost absolutely no success. The bad news was last year was the highest we've ever tracked in the last 8 years, so it's coming off of a pretty high. Right. One good thing is if you're traveling sort of on a 90-minute flight or less, which means, like say you're flying from San Francisco to L.A. or like in my case, Dallas to Houston. Those flights typically don't change price very much around the holidays because they're so frequency and you have some low-cost airline competition.
Oh.
So if you're flying to those, that's your best bet, really. Once you get to about 2 hours of flight, then you see these big increases in the price point. So if you're flying around 2 hours, 2.5 hours, you want to shoot for a price a little bit under $300 round trip. That's a pretty good deal for Thanksgiving if you can get that all in.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're going coast to coast, which is more like 5.5 hours, anything under about $450 is a pretty good deal around the holidays.
Okay, so look for those prices, folks. And if you're getting something way above that, then start tweaking some things, and one of the things you can tweak are inconveniences, and everyone knows that a stopover is an inconvenience, right?
Absolutely, and during the holidays it can be even worse because when Mother Nature gets involved, which is, even if it happens in New York and you happen to be on the West Coast, it has a trickle-down effect. So you want to be, I always say during the holidays the best point in time is looking at the airport in your rearview mirror, and that's where you want to be.
Right. So, people have told me this for years, to check the surrounding airports. So when I lived in the Bay Area, you always check Oakland, San Jose, San Francisco. When you're down in Los Angeles, you check LAX, Burbank,
Long Beach, Santa Ana,
but
Wayne.
There's so many of them there, right? And then along the Central Coast, we have Santa Barbara, Santa Maria, San Luis Obispo, Monterey. And so if you can just be flexible on which airport you're going to, in some cases, depending on the carrier, it can really save you a lot.
No, absolutely. You can save a lot of money, and a lot of that has to do with demand. On any given day, there could be different demand in those particular areas, and it's a simple demand situation. If there's less demand, then they tend to discount a little bit more. The one thing that you need to make sure is when you look at these alternate airports, either leaving, some people have the choice of leaving from an alternate or arriving, take into account parking fees and what the difference would be, and also take into account what that gasoline cost would be. So typically it's much better for families of 4 to drive in certain situations under 5 hours than it is to fly.
Just a little tip to people. I just flew out of San Francisco for my trip to Austin, and I parked at BART at the Millbrae station, and I paid $5 a day. You have to then take BART to get into, which is really your best option, but take BART to get into SFO in order to get that rate. But $5 a day for parking is pretty hard to beat.
No, absolutely. And I can tell you other parts of the country, like the folks in Cincinnati who habitually have the highest airline ticket prices, many people will drive 2 to 4 hours to adjacent cities like Indianapolis, Dayton, for example, in order to get cheaper airfare.
Interesting. I love it. And then what about carry-ons now? I try to fly with just carry-on only.
Well, I haven't checked the bag, and I fly probably more than the average bear in over 8 years. And my wife, I finally convinced her 4 or 5 years ago to do the same thing, even on our long trips over the oceans. Certainly, carry-ons, except on a few airlines. You have Frontier now that's potentially charging for that, and you have Spirit Airlines and Allegiant, so be careful. They do have carry-on fees. But for the most part, if you can carry on, if you have a family of 4 and they all have check bags, maybe consolidate. So instead of having, 3 25-pounders, buy that 1 50-pounder and lighten up a little bit so you just check one bag. And certainly Southwest and JetBlue still have a first check bag that's free. So those airlines you need to check into as well.
And finally, you might not show up to grandma's house bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but those overnight flights, the red eyes as they're called, are a final way to save money if you just can't find a cheap flight.
Yeah, especially if you're going coast to coast. I have a sort of a rule that's very simple. We see literally millions of airfare changes each day here. It's fly hungry. So if you're flying at certain times when you would be eating breakfast or eating lunch or dinner, that's when nobody wants to fly, and that's typically when it's cheaper.
Oh, that's a great rule of thumb. I hadn't thought of that one. So fly when you would be hungry. And speaking of that,
yes, there's a fee for that.
Right, there's now a fee for that. And so if you really are one of those that likes to eat when you fly, buy it at one of those vendors once you're past security.
Absolutely, and you can't get it through security nowadays. So
no, you can't.
Do it after the fact.
Rick Seaney, CEO of FareCompare.com, with all the Thanksgiving travel tips. Thank you so much, sir.
Hey, great. Thank you. Take care.
All right, everyone. We are back in just a moment with much more food, wine, and travel talk here on Eat, Drink, Explore Radio. Watch us online at eatdrinkexplore.com.